Saying here. All right, good. Hey, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So where are you located?
I'm in Calgary, Alberta, in Canada.
I love the Canadians. Like the older I've gotten, the more I realize, because I deal in a lot with jazz radio. A lot of artists get grants from the government. They respond to gun violence in different ways than America. You got the socialized healthcare. I love it. It's just,
I
and I'm
know,
not
I
saying it's
know.
perfect or it's a
Oh, no,
utopia.
no. You know what's interesting? It's funny. I was just in this conversation yesterday, or very recently, is I feel like the perfect healthcare would be like it's the American system, but with the ethics and
Yeah,
the openness of Canada.
I
I've,
got
I've
it.
worked too much and know too many people on
Okay. All right.
a question and
Yep.
diagnoses don't make sense. And I'm just like, I see now.
Yeah.
So
Well, I guess that's a good starting place for us here with our conversation is to begin with COVID. How did you survive that time period, and how has it changed the way that you conduct business and do things now?
sure. Well, okay, here in Canada, retail is still very heavily brick and mortar. We're not as online crazy as the US for a multitude of reasons. Shipping's more expensive, it's not as convenient to return product, we don't have the same supply chain you do. So we had to really pivot and take where we're super high touch, bespoke, luxurious experience and put it online through intimate Zoom interviews like this.
Right.
So I would get a client come online and we would work with them. And it's interesting because even thinking back to how many restrictions there were, at one point you couldn't be in the same office as another person. So we had two locations, we'd separate our team. But we also had them keep coming into work. And one of the things they shared is that helped with mental health
Yeah.
because they still had to get ready and leave the house every day. So that was part of it. And then I think some of it, personally, I was raised on a farm in southern Saskatchewan. It's the Montana of Canada, and not the good part of Montana where the other Americans go and build houses.
Yeah.
The farming part that nobody goes to.
Yeah.
And so that's just north of the Montana border. And I was raised in such simplicity and without any extras that I feel that having that neural programming, it was back to that, right? Can't do anything, can't go anywhere, gotta eat 3 times a day still and go back to the basics. So I think that was part of where I successfully came through pandemic. And I think the other piece, and it's interesting because I'm a true believer that when things are happening, they're happening for you. And in my past, I had a very contentious divorce. And at that time, all the things that matter to someone, they were threatened to me. Finances, state of my family, future, dreams that will not come true. And I went through that 10 years prior to COVID in a very traumatic way. So by the time COVID came, I thought, oh, I've already processed these feelings. It was a repeat. So it's very interesting to see that hell prepared me for probably what some other people, it was their first time going through those feelings.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting perspective. So I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at a career day,
Right?
and I'm going to have one of them look up at you and say, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How would you explain that?
For sure. So I often have to explain it to my own children. So they have very unique upbringing, being raised in the lingerie industry. So they know for the most part that I sell bras, panties, and swimsuits. And so I'm very open about what we do and the importance of these products. But in third grade, usually you've only been exposed to panties. A lot of third graders aren't wearing bras yet. Right. So by the time you move up a few years, they get more exposed to this. I don't think there's any third graders that wouldn't know of that industry.
Right.
So that's basically, yeah, they think most kids think it's cool that I own a store.
Yeah. 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 So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream when you grew up?
Oh gosh, I think I still have the book that has my dreams and ambitions in it. I think it was probably between hairdresser and teacher.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
and
it
again,
seems like
remembering this is a small rural town, what your world is what you know at that age. And so I hadn't seen much of the world, but yeah, those
Yeah.
were my big ambitions.
So let's get to the essence of you, and what were some of the seeds that were planted into you to become who you are today, to be an entrepreneur and to do what you do?
Okay. So I think a big tipping point that happened for me, and I remember it and I laugh about it, but I remember the first thing that was planted into me was my parents separated. My mom moved to the city and she worked for the government. So her programming to me was get security, get a secure job that you could never get fired from and you'll get a pension from. So I followed her path and I got a job at the government. So I was working in a gray cubicle answering tax questions for a living and was so unfulfilled. Went on a big international trip through Italy and Egypt. And of course, you see some of the wonders of the world and you meet all these other foreign travelers. And I came home and I got post-travel depression. And I'm sure there was like deeper levels of it in there, but this is a real thing after a trip. So I went to find a psychologist. And at that time, I felt taboo about going and shameful about walking in through the door. And he was quite funny and he was kind of sarcastic. And he even looked back to me and he's like, you just went on to see these amazing places and you came back to a gray cubicle and you're not sure why you feel depressed. He's like, I can help you there. But he's like, the bigger piece I want to help you with is you were raised by entrepreneurs and you're working at the government. And that was the first time I ever perceived farming as entrepreneurship. I think I just looked at it like its own cosm that wasn't entrepreneurship or running a business. And that was kind of an aha moment. So that would have been in me. But then farming itself and being raised in that environment, grit, perseverance, making something out of nothing, these are what comes out of farm kids. And you learn to work hard and you don't complain and you just keep going. And so you need something in you that's been hardened because of the levels of uncertainty in business and entrepreneurship.
So who's been kind of a hero for you in your life?
That's a good question. I think some of the heroes I've discovered probably more in the past 10 years in my own transformative processes. Because of my background, I was I don't want to say hardened, but my heart was quite closed. And so I think turning towards teachers that taught me vulnerability and opening my heart are really some of the people that I've looked up to. Definitely Brene Brown would be in there. And there's a multitude of others that have now normalized sharing feelings and emotion and doing things that feel scary. And I think that's probably been some of my biggest heroes that are willing to share stories that make them feel naked.
So let me ask you this, and you may have already answered it. If you can meet anybody alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, who would it be?
That's a great question. I don't know if I don't know if it'd be Brene. I've watched so much of her stuff. Like she probably has a restraining order against me. I'm definitely on the watch list. Alive currently, let me think. I'm not sure why this one's throwing me off so much. I think, okay, you know who it is? There's a teacher that I've wanted to attend some stuff from. His name is Artie Wu. And I started studying this in the past 6 months just through a chance documentary. So he is studying what creativity deprivation is doing to humanity.
Wow.
And so once you're conscious of something, you see it everywhere. If you're looking for a red car, you see a red car.
Yep.
Red cars. So what he brought up, and in simplistic terms, is if you look at even our education system from play school to grade 12, the level of creativity in your day is almost completely removed. And the first thing they'll cut, even in Canada, is the arts. Yes. So he's now studying this. And then we chase money. And I have done this. I went to go to engineering, I went to go to law school, contemplating medicine, and because we want money. Now, these are a lot of professions that you don't touch creativity in a day, but you can make tons of money. And so he's now studying that you can do this till about 40, and now stuff is happening in people's bodies like illness and mental illness because we no longer paint, sing, play an instrument, color, and what this is doing to humanity. And it's so interesting because I
Yeah.
will meet people that are having some sort of crisis, and maybe they are a doctor, lawyer, engineer. And when you hear what their initial dreams were to be writers or musicians and how far they've gone, and now they're in these crises. And so I would love to go meet Artie Wu
Yeah.
and test this deeper with him.
That's fascinating. So what is the fire in you to do what you do? What is it that provides the fuel for you to get through and to accomplish what you want to do?
So personally, my why is always helping other people. That's where, at any level. And so even in the business of retail can really take the wind out of your sails some days, and just what you have to deal with. And throughout pandemic, it wasn't just retail, but supply chain issues and all the rest of them, increased costs, which means fewer profits. So in any given day, I just feel like if we've helped someone and helped someone feel better about themselves, I know there's a ripple effect to this.
What's your favorite client success story?
Okay. I have one, and I felt the emotion come up in me. Because we're very specialized one-on-one, we had this moment where this husband called in, and I could tell he was an older gentleman, and he wanted to ask if we would help his wife get fit. And it was either Parkinson's or MS, and she was wheelchair bound, and she was no longer verbal, so she couldn't speak. And he also explained to us he needs to be there, and I understand we're helping her in nudity, and she can't speak, but she could hear, and her vision was fine, but we had to be wheelchair accessible, and he explained how this would work. So she came in and he explained what she needed. We've helped other wheelchair clients too. So all they wanted was something utilitarian, even closer to medical. And typically what women will ask for that are being practical is something beige. And so we found her that, but then I always want to put women through what we call the surprise and delight. You bring someone something that either pushes them outside their comfort zone or they didn't ask for, that you feel may enlighten this woman's world. So I found her the absolute most beautiful red bra. There's a power to red and women. Mm-hmm. And I put it on her, and I saw her face light up. And I asked her, do you want me to get your husband and show your husband this? And she's nodded yes. And he came in, and I could see his reaction and her reaction. And this happened years ago, and I will never forget the experience of doing that. And even I can feel it somatically in my body as I repeat the story to you today.
That's awesome. So let me take you back to when you were 20. Let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the 20-year-old version of yourself, and you could give that version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained. What would you tell your young version?
Oh, you bet. I think the biggest thing is I thought so much of my life was going to come from the meaning of career, marriage, 2.5 children, and a white picket fence. And I chased all of it, and I got all of it. And then I remember hitting it and thinking, shouldn't I feel happier? Shouldn't this have brought me more joy and satisfaction and fulfillment? So I would love to be able to go back and meet with my 20-year-old self to potentially have different experiences, or not chase that American dream so much. It's the same in Canada. Canadian dream too.
Yeah, for sure. So what are you the proudest of that you've done in your life so far?
The proudest that I've done, I think it's the challenges that I've persevered through. I think a lot of the things that have crossed my life and been sent to teach me amazing lessons would have brought most people to their knees, and they would have quit. Either quit business, quit careers, quit relationships, quit life. And I always just look for a solution. And sometimes I've had to learn to step out of looking for solution, but I think my ability to persevere through challenges that would ruin most people I'm most proud of, that I can keep going and here to tell the story.
So the one thing about business is that there's success stories like there would be in sport. You know, there's these stories that we remember that are quite seminal. As a successful businesswoman, what's been your favorite business success story that you've witnessed in your life that's inspired you?
Somebody else's story.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. One that was made into movie would definitely be Joy's, the one about the mop.
Yeah.
I love stories. I love the stories of coming from nothing, or the phoenix rising. Even one I just thought of this morning. One of the things, again, going back to my 20-year-old self, this had meaning. So I did my MBA, and I did it through Queen's University in Canada, which is our Ivy League. It's our Harvard of Canada. And this business school is named after the founder of a bank. And he came to present to us at an alumni event. I believe he lives in Calgary. And I literally thought about this story, that at one point he was going to be a home builder and bankrupted himself, moved into his sister's basement, could only pay her like $200 a month rent. But same thing, was like, you know what, I'm going to come back, and I'm going to come back bigger and better than where I left off. And I think he went back into home building, but he now owns a bank, or he's part of a bank. We don't have a lot of private banks in Canada. And so I love these stories where people were completely wiped out and then came back up and never quit.
Yeah.
So I think one I really admired. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a great story. So everyone out there has a perception of you. You have all these pockets of people, family, friends, clients, colleagues, but you're in control of your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? That's a good question. I know I'm super growth motivated. I'm always trying to grow and learn and be a better version of myself. And I've spent a lot of time going inward and touching things that most people don't have the courage to do. And so I know that's a huge component of my identity. And I probably try to do too much or help too many people, which spreads me thin. But I think a large part of me, and it gets to, when I've been in activities that describe me, but I see it too, is strength. Is that sometimes you just go in and you have this strength that I see in myself that maybe I don't always see that others have. And I have a huge heart. It's just taking me a long time to show it to others. And so loving others is a huge part of my life as well.
So Colette, if anyone wants to get your products, learn more about you, anything pertaining to your world, where can they go?
So we are at BraTopia.ca. We also own French Postcard.ca. There's not as much information on there, and on LinkedIn.
Excellent. This has been great. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for giving me your story. I appreciate it. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Nice.
See ya.
Take care.